Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Business of Property. I'm your host, Cheryl Leong from Property Development Australia. And I'm sorry we had a bit of tech hiccup just before joining. So, in any case, we are here, and I hope there's a few of you that have been waiting around patiently. I appreciate that. So, the Business of Property, every week we interview superstar guests in the property development space that share their expertise, their deals, and their stories to help empower, build, and grow our community of property developers. So, hello, Facebook land, LinkedIn, YouTube land. Give me a shout out if you're here with us today in the comments below. So, we have with us today on the Business of Property a geophysicist, surveying engineer turned property developer, and founder of Trick Property Group, Remo Stander. And I'm going to before I bring Remo on, this is going to be a really interesting topic because we're going to be talking about residential versus light industrial development and have a little bit of a battle of the world. So, Remo, come on board. Please join us.
Good evening. How's it going, Cheryl?
Hello. Yeah, really well. Thank you, Remo. We got here. That's the
We
main.
did. I'm
That's the
going
main
to.
thing.
I'll
Oh
apologize in advance for
no, not a
my
problem.
technical disability.
I was going to say, I'm glad we're better at property than we are at tech.
Yeah.
So thank you, Rafiq, for helping us out with that. So Remo, obviously we want to know a little bit about your background, how you got into the property space, but you didn't always start off in with light industrial. You've been in that residential space. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that journey and how you've ended up going light industrial is the place to be.
Yeah, Cheryl, look, it's pretty funny. I used to work for a large property development company on the Sunshine Coast. I started with them in 2016 as their sales manager, and within 6 months, I was made general manager of the company. And I was overseeing everything from acquisition to raising funds and capital to the approval process, and then the delivery, and then also the divestment part of the company. So it was a substantial amount of information to take on in such a short period of time. But obviously, it's always I don't know. I kind of feel like I learn quick, and if I don't, I tend to throw myself into a position where my back's up against the wall and I've got nowhere to go. So the only option is to make a success of what I'm doing. So, which was okay. I think at the time my family life and my social life took a bit of a beating, and that was good. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you got to sacrifice some things in order to move ahead. But whilst cutting my teeth and learning the property development industry, majority of what I was doing was residential. Now, I'm not here tonight to tell people that residential is no good. Just for personal preference, I prefer light industrial, and there's a number of reasons why. So I've done over 27 projects in residential. I'm now up to project number 6 in light industrial. And I've got, and look, I'm not saying I'll never go back to residential. I will continue to do residential. However, residential typically for us, because we work with joint venture partners, it takes a specific type of joint venture partner or investor to invest in residential versus light industrial. And obviously tonight we'll go through those pros and cons of why I prefer light industrial over residential. But I think typically, when we grow up and when we start our property development journey, we typically veer towards what we've known or what we grew up with our entire life. So I grew up with residential as well. I think most of our listeners would agree that they've grown up with residential too. So when you go out and you start doing your own property developments, we tend to start looking at residential. And residential is great if you're starting out and you've got, if you don't have all the money in the world and you only have a small amount of capital, residential is great because you can go and do a battle axe block or a 1 into 2 subdivision or 1 into 4 subdivision. People can typically do those on their own. Once you move into light industrial, you're typically doing projects that are much larger. So anyway, I don't want to ramble on. I know you've got You've got a substantial
We've
amount of
got
questions.
lots of questions. I've got lots of questions. I find this whole topic very interesting because, like you said, I've been exposed to industrial, some level of commercial, and interestingly enough, I mean, my dad was in the light industrial space in terms of building and constructions for all his life. And so, let's start back at light industrial 101. What is considered light industrial
Oh, look,
property?
light industrial could be anything from a storage facility where people go and buy little shoebox-sized storage units.
Mm,
They'll range between 30 to 60 square meters. It could also be considered a 50 square meter unit of light industrial where people might work from. I'm finding a lot at the moment, a lot of people from Sydney are sort of looking for small light industrial boxes to put their belongings in.
mm,
Um, a lot of people are using them to purchase to store sports cars in. And
mm,
they can range up to, I would consider anything under 1,000 square meters light industrial. Anything
mm.
over 1,000 square meters would be heavy industrial.
Yeah.
So it all
Okay.
depends. I will say this, light industrial is not commercial.
Mm. That
Commercial
was
is
the next
typically
question. Yeah.
somewhere with a nice glass front door where people can see what's going on inside your business, right?
Mm,
Light industrial is more for people wanting to store, people running air conditioning or pool companies or electrical companies from that facility. Um, there's even unique light industrial like our project that we've got in Wyong where it's zoned where you can actually have living quarters upstairs and work from
mm,
downstairs. So that's a
mm.
very unique light industrial concept as well. It's becoming more and more popular, and I completely support it. I think it's a great concept. But yeah, that's typically light industrial for me.
Okay. So you're talking sort of like warehousing, storage, some light manufacturing potentially,
Correct.
but say for example, like your panel beaters, your mechanics and all of that, would that be considered light industrial
Correct. Yes.
areas?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously storage being quite popular at the moment, like you said, a lot of people moving into smaller spaces need
Yeah.
stuff to be able to store things, hide their special cars from their wives or husbands, whatever that might be.
That's right.
Special cars. And so, all right, then because I'm thinking with light industrial, how do people educate themselves as to where to purchase light industrial? Because often people are thinking, all right, the data, I want to follow the data of where people are migrating to. Where do you find that sort of data as to where is a good place to purchase and develop light industrial?
Yeah, look, the normal data that we get from the likes of realestate.com, Domain, and obviously their affiliate companies, the two paid prescription
Mm,
websites. I also get a lot of my information from other developers. I've got a lot of friends who are buyers agents. So I don't rely on buyers agents and other developers as much. Obviously, I like facts and figures. I know that most of the information that I'm going to get from buyers agents, real estate agents, and other friends and developers in the industry is all opinion based. I like facts and
mm,
figures. So I go to where the actual data has been recorded, and that's where I start. Once I've got that information, that's when I go and I call on my peers, the people that I rely on. Obviously, Scott Northcott, my business partner, is obviously well versed, well educated, and follows the market extremely close. So obviously, a lot of what we do is based on the property clock. So we look at where that particular suburb sits on the property clock.
mm,
And then obviously my last port of call is to go and speak to an agent, a buyer's agent. And then also there's a few people that I know in the industry that have I guess, a list of investors, and I will get their input. So a lot of investors follow the property market as well. So I'll call on a lot of these people to find out what's hot, which areas are great. When I
mm,
look at a specific area, one of the key things that I speak to one of the key things that I speak to the real estate agents about is what is in high demand in that area, what's for sale, what has sold in the last 12 months, and what is currently on the books to come on in the next 12 months. So if there's obviously land for sale, I'll look at the zoning of that land, I'll look at what it's being sold for. If it's a good price, I'll typically put an offer in on it.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
if it's not well priced, I'll speak to the agents and find out what sort of inquiries are on there at the moment, what they think is going to go in there, and so forth. So there's not just, we don't just look in one specific area. You're not going to get all of the information just in one specific area. So I think for anybody wanting to start out in any part of development, it's important that you start building some good relationships with people that have access to that information.
mhm.
And also build relationships with agents, because the information that they're going to give you is vital. It's vitally important, but you don't want them to provide you information based on an agenda that they have. You want to go into it with them being non-biased in a
Yeah,
particular area.
yeah. And what would you say are the key data points that you typically would look out for?
Oh, good question. So some of the important things that I look at is migration. So
Mhm,
people moving from one particular area into a new area. We're seeing a lot of people moving from Sydney up towards into the Central Coast,
mhm,
Wyong area, Tuggerah, around there. A lot of people are moving up to Newcastle. A lot of people moving up to the Hunter Valley, Nelson Bay, Maitland. So we're seeing this big shift of people just wanting to get out of Sydney, and I can
mm,
understand why. I think there's a big reason about what's happened over the last 2 years why people are moving out, which is great, because it just means that the rest of the northern coast of New South Wales is obviously booming at the moment. So that's one thing I look for. I also look at what sort of what's going in, how much is being spent on infrastructure, looking at infrastructure plans. I also speak to council. I will call council quite often and go, hey, I'm just interested on what you guys are working on at the moment.
mhm,
Um, that's another thing that the other thing that most people don't know is you can go onto council website and there's a lot of public information. So you can see what sort of DAs have been lodged within council over the last 3 to 6 months, and start looking at what sort of developments are coming up, whether it's just roadworks, whether it's road widenings, whether it's other light industrial, whether it's greenfield sites. All of that information is freely available on council. It's public information. That's another place that people should go and have a look at. Yeah, so that's typically what I look for. And then obviously
mhm.
I start looking at what sort of infrastructure is already there. So
Yep.
to give it, like the light industrial unit that I've got in Lisero at the moment, there's a train station literally across the road from us, which is great.
Mm,
It
mm.
gives people from Sydney the opportunity to come and buy light industrial in the area. They can hop on the train, jump, and then within 30 minutes, they're at their office where they work from, or their manufacturing site.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
look at stuff like that as well.
So I mean, you talk about migration, and a lot of it's around migration of people, right? But really, what in light industrial, you're catering to businesses that want to rent the space, or individuals that want to rent the space or purchase the space for some level of business, I'm assuming.
Correct. Yes.
So what do you also look at the types of businesses that are where there's a demand in the area? Is that the sort of level of depth you need to look at for? Because residential, it's like, okay, people are moving into this area, so there's demand for residential property. How do you
Correct. Yes.
determine what sort of industrial, I guess, if it's
Well, look,
yeah.
yeah, so unfortunately with that, the only real place to get that type of information is from the agents. The agents are obviously the guys at the forefront of everything that's happening. So I've got to
Mm,
rely on the information then from the agents. I work with a guy on the Central Coast at the moment, Brad Rogers. He's phenomenal in what he does. He feeds me all the information that I need. In
mm,
that obviously in particular to our current development that's there. So And again, this is why I said build relationships with agents so that there's no, there's no agenda behind the information that they're giving you. So yes, I will go to my agents and I'll say, what sort of inquiries have you been getting? One of the other things that I do as well, as soon as I buy a site, I put a sign up to say this is what's coming. The agents then start getting inquiries in, and then they can feed back to me and say, hey, I've just spoken to a builder, I've spoken to an electrician or air conditioning guy, or a guy looking for a garage, and they're chasing 50, 100, 200 or 500 square meters. In Lisero at the moment, I'm building a 400 square meter shed because one of the inquiries that we had was from 2 business partners. I'm unsure about what their particular business is, but they want a 400 square meter unit. So we've got a contract on that now. We're building a unit specifically just for them. So it's important to understand, as soon as you go live with your property, as soon as you've got the property and it's yours exclusively, put some signs up so you can actually start getting inquiries in, and then you can build based on what the public wants, not based on what you think they need.
And so are you building generally to sell or hold or a mix?
Right now we're building to sell. Obviously it's a seller's market. We will hold at some stage when that opportunity comes. But again, because of the structure of what we do, we obviously take on joint venture partners to come and partner with us in our projects, and we provide a 50% return on profit back to them. So whatever profits we make on the projects, they get 50% of it, right? So when we make decisions whether we buy and sell or whether we buy and hold, it's a decision that we would have to make as a unit together. It's not something that myself and Scott would make on our own. And at the end of the day, we've got a lot of clients' funds in those projects. So we need to make sure that we do what's best for the project, what's best for our clients. So also some of our clients do choose to hold stock. If they do choose to hold stock, they've got the option to purchase stock on completion of the development.
Yeah, fantastic. And let's talk about the time frame and keeping in mind sort of doing a comparison with residential and light industrial. Time frame for a development application, fairly similar, or are we talking about quite different?
Very good question. Look, it depends on the actual council. I have not seen a DA for residential under 12 months. I've not seen a DA for light industrial over 10 months, right? So yes, there's a 2-month gap there. Worst case scenario, 10 months for light industrial. Best case scenario for residential is 12 months. So I've been involved in residential projects in the past where it's taken 2.5, 3 years to get a DA completed. With light industrial, they're fairly easy to complete, depending on the complexity of your site as well. Sometimes you can just go CDC, so you don't even have to go through DA. So if you go CDC, you've got, once your CDC is lodged, it takes 10 days for it to be approved. If it's not approved within 10 days, then it's considered an automatic approval. So then you can just start building because they have to approve it. They've got 10 days to respond.
Yeah. And so that's the approval part. Then the next part, I'm assuming, is probably the main difference. It's the construction time frame.
Yes, correct. So with a light industrial, it takes us about 4 months, so 16 weeks to get a light industrial from the day that we start turning dirt till the day that it's certified completed, right? And I'm talking, and I'll show you guys an example of this shortly. Light industrial units that we're about to start in Lisero, that's about 12,500 square meters. So we're sitting at about 6,000 square meters of floor space that we're building on. With a residential, I invested in residential in 2017, April. I got paid out in April 2020, and I got my profits paid out in 2021. So about 6 or 8 weeks ago, I got my profits paid out. So, and that's a once-off. That's just my individual case. However, because I speak to, and CEO, my sidekick, he's an awesome guy. He speaks to a lot of our clients as well. A lot of people that we speak to have been involved in property development for such a long time, but they typically find that when they transact on residential projects, nothing runs under 2.5, 3 years. Everything, I mean, some of the projects that I've been involved in, not done myself, but projects that I've invested in with other developers, they have taken up to 4.5, 5 years for those projects to be completed. And it's not always necessarily the developer's fault. There are time delays, there's council delays. Every time council they find something in a DA that they don't like, they send out an RFI. So as soon as that request for more information comes out, they've got 6 weeks to respond, and they've got 6 RFIs they can send out to you. So once they've sent out 6 RFIs over 6 weeks, that's a substantial time delay just for you to get your DA ready to then submit to council, right? We typically don't see that much in light industrial. And yeah, it's just time versus time. A light industrial project could take you anywhere between 12 to 18 months from start to completion. A residential project would take you anywhere from about 18 months to 5, 6 years. And I know what my clients want. I know our joint venture partners are just not interested in residential unless it's just a straight, plain forward, flat land subdivision.
Yeah.
They work really well, but they're not as profitable.
And am I right to say you probably have less complaints for neighbours about industrial development?
Well, we typically don't have any complaints from neighbours. However, in saying that, we typically don't do light industrial developments right across the road from residential. My Lisero project is literally opposite residential housing. So that's going to be interesting. This will be the first that we've done that's right across the road from residential living. So we'll see what happens there. But look, at the end of the day, I think typically when I go into a development, I go and introduce myself to all of the neighbors. I go and say hello. I give everybody my personal number. And I make friends with them. That way, if they find that something is untoward or there's something they're not happy with, they've got my direct access number. They can give me a call and complain to me. I can sort it out rather than then having to go to council and then us copying a fine from council and then having shutdowns and time, and more delays and so forth. So there's ways to go about it.
Yeah. And so if you can walk us through a bit of the construction process and materials, like how can they achieve such a quick construction time frame?
So we typically do tilt slab construction. So the slabs are measured out on the builder's site. It's not on our actual site. Everything is sort of put together off-site in a nice big yard. They lay all the concrete. Then they pick them up, put them on the back of trucks. They drive them up the street. So they've got to drive about 45 minutes south of where they're constructed at the moment. And then once we get to site, they literally just have to drop them in, tilt them up, put the braces in just to stabilize them, and then we get started. So it's like building a big block of Lego. That's really what it is, and it's fun to watch go up, and it gets done really quick.
Yeah, and then that means that, like you said, that's achieved within a few months. You've got buildings up and occupied and pretty much ready, wrapping up that particular project. So let's get into some fun bits, which are the numbers. Right, you've got
Yes.
something to show us. You've got a feasibility to show us. It'll be really interesting to see what that looks like, and construction costs and so on. So over to you to share your screen.
Beautiful. Okay.
Anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop it in the comments, and I shall read it out to Remo as well. I'm excited to learn more.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm a numbers and figures type person. I like facts and figures. I'm not I can crunch numbers all day. So this is at 5 Awaba Street in Lisero. We've already paid the deposit and everything else in this, but we're essentially paying $2,650,000 for the site, plus a few, obviously, finder's fees and stuff like that. We've got 12,000 square meters in size. We're utilizing 49% of the site.
Is that fairly typical?
Yeah, I'd say up to about 52% is what you can typically push that envelope with. Anything above that, I wouldn't even bother. The lower you can come down to 40, the better. You don't want to push the envelope with council because it's easy for them to knock you back. You've got to be very careful about what sort of design and how much floor space you're putting. You also got to remember that if you're putting MES into a unit, you've got to have X amount of car spaces for MES, X amount of car spaces for 100 square meters. And again, it's all council subject to council. So you've got to figure out what that council requires in that particular area. So,
and mezzanine's the second level.
correct,
Is that
yes.
correct? Yeah.
That's right, yes. So just to show you guys some basic figures on this, we're using 49%, about 6,580. Our cost per square meter for the floor is 1,300 square meters.
For construction?
That's cost per, yeah, that's for construction, yeah. So $1,300 a square meter. We're paying $700 a square meter for the construction of the MES. These figures here are very interesting. Now, I don't have any figures in MES, so it's zero there. So that figure has no bound on that figure. And I will just point out, I'm going to change some numbers here. Keep in mind that this is the number that we look at, 115% at 50-50 profit share split, right? Equity is what we typically raise on a project, and then the bank that's our bank construction funding. So that's
what's that LVR there that you're working off in terms of equity loan?
About 60 to 65%. Yeah. So if you'll see here, right now we've got sales. So we've got two different size units. Obviously, a larger unit would be sold for a little bit less, and the smaller units sell for a little bit more. The smaller units we're selling at 3,300 Inc GST. Okay, and these figures here have a bearing on that amount there. And I'm going to start changing these figures in a sec so you guys can actually see how quickly these figures can change. So we're sitting at 3,300 Inc GST for the smaller units, 3,000 for the bigger units. Keep in mind, this is all Inc GST at the moment. We've also got a $350,000 contingency, which is currently registered to the project as a debt. Now, contingency is about 5%. We raise those funds. The funds sit in the account, and they are purely there to overcome any financial challenges that we have on site. So let's say hypothetically we go onto site and we run into a bit of hard rock. I've got X amount of funds to throw at it to spend some time on site and get someone in to get rid of the hard rock or drill it out or cut it out. I will say this though, we do copious amounts of research due diligence. We do all our geotech and everything up front, so we know what we're in for as soon as the project starts. Okay.
Yeah.
So we typically don't use contingencies. They're just a fail safe there with money in the account. So if we start running short on funds, I've got funds to access.
Yeah. Just to clarify, how many units are we talking about in total?
On this unit, on this development, we're looking at about 40 units.
40?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Because I noticed as well, that's a fairly chunky marketing budget there.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to run through those figures with you in a minute and just show you. So I just want you to remember, everything that we do is highly conservative. And I'll point this out quick. So 350,000, we obviously bump up all these figures on the left-hand side to make sure that we've got a substantial amount of fat in the project. These figures here as well, the agents on the Central Coast are currently selling for $3,850 a square meter ex GST. All right, so we're $550 $550 less than what they're currently charging. So I'm gonna start populating and messing around with these figures so you guys can see just how conservative we actually are on our figures. I'm going to take out the contingency as well. Obviously, we've got an 11% finance as well over 12 months. That should really be a blended rate of about 6%. It should be for 6 months, not 12 months. So I'm just going to go ahead and start changing some of these figures. And if you keep your eye on that, and this is, Cheryl, this is the reason why I love light industrial. You're not going to be able to change these figures the way that I'm going to do now with a residential project. Residential is pretty much locked in. You can't really sell for that much. Also, you're not working it out at per square meter. You're working it out at a block of land. Also, with residential, your cost per square meter is not worked out a cost per square meter. You're typically paying around $100,000 for your civils on each block of land, and then you've got to build and. So it's very, very different to these FISOs, and I'd be more than happy to jump on one night and do a residential FISO. It's just they're not my favorite. But if we go in here and we type in, let's bring this over here. If we go 3850, and again, I'm still including GST in this. I'm not excluding GST. The agents are selling for 3850 ex GST. For the smaller units, the larger units are selling for 3500 ex GST. I'm still selling for 3500 in GST. As I said, our blended rate should be about 5% over 6 months. You can see our holding cost on our construction finance has come down substantially. And if I take our contingency out and we don't spend it, we're currently sitting at 214% return on equity. So that means if a client puts in $100,000, they'll get $107,000 back plus their contribution. Now, again, I want you to keep in mind that we are very conservative with these figures. This is why I don't share these type of figures with our clients. But this is the reality of doing a light industrial versus a residential.
So Remo, I mean, it's obviously very promising looking at it. Let's talk about the things that, what are the risks and what are the negative things about light industrial that we need to consider as well?
Yeah, I'll just stop screen sharing here for a sec. Look, light industrial and residential, I feel, hold the same risks. I kind of feel like light industrial is maybe a little bit less riskier, only in terms of your development timeline is shortened, your cost outlay is shortened. When you go and lease out a light industrial unit, you typically sign a 5-year contract. When you lease out your investment property, you could sign a contract as little as 3 months, depending on what they want. Every time you release in a residential, there's extra marketing costs, there's holding costs. Also, when something breaks in a residential, you're liable for it. You've got to claim insurance. You've got to go and fix stuff. With light industrial, something breaks, the person leasing is responsible to get it fixed. And as I said, we're signing 5-year contracts. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of light industrial, as you can see. The profits are higher, the timelines are shorter. The risk in light industrial comes down to how you're structured. In fact, the risk in anything that you do in development comes down to how you're structured. A lot of people get caveats or they'll just have contracts on a development. That's probably not the right way to go when you're doing a joint venture partnership. And also there's no transparency with a lot of developers. In fact, I think we're probably one of the only developers in Australia that actually provide full transparency on finances to our clients. So when a client comes and transacts with us, they get access to the Xero folder. So they can see live how much funds are in the account, what it's being spent on. They get access to the invoices. We don't cross-collateralize like I shouldn't say a lot of developers do that, but I know some of them do. And cross-collateralization they can achieve, even though it's not legal to do it, they make it legal by just signing it out as a loan, which is a
Mm.
it's a conversation for another night. But yeah, look, the risks are, if you're going to go into a development, you need to figure out what your financial security is. So are you getting a first and second mortgage security, or are you just signing a joint venture contract, or are you signing a development funding contract? Are you purely getting an interest on your funds? Is it considered a loan? What does that actually look like? When we run our developments with our clients, they get first mortgage security over the land because we purchased the land in cash. So we've got 100% equity. Once we go for construction funding, the construction loan is actually registered in our name. It's not registered in the client's name. So they've got no exposure to the loan. And yeah, once the construction finance comes into play, the clients go from first mortgage to second mortgage. And once we set up the SPV, special purpose vehicles, the clients are structured into a unit trust. So each client will have X amount of shares proportional to the amount that they are transacting with on the project. So if you're putting in 100,000, you'll have 100,000 units. And that's typically how it works. On top of that, we then secure that with a joint venture agreement outlining that once the project is completed, clients will earn 50% of the profits. And then we also have a development funding agreement to back that up as well.
Okay, so you're basically funding the purchase of the land out of cash, and then any of that, and then borrowing the rest of so that goes in as equity, and that's why you get the blended rate as well.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Oh, good. Well, that's plenty. Remo, if and I'm sitting here going, oh, what are the other things I haven't asked? And I'm sure they are. So if anyone has questions and comments, please, if you've done industrial, I'd love for you to share your story and what you found, whether you agree with Remo or don't agree with Remo. I mean, it's all sort of the whole point of this community is to be able to explore different types of development, what's working, what people are doing. So Remo, you've got a few projects on at the moment. Hey Mox, how are you? Hola, he says. And people want to find out a little bit more. How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, look, they can reach us at propertyadvice.com.au. They can look us up on Facebook, Property Realm Australia, or if they want, give me a call, 0427 682 623. I did have a link before with I've asked CEO if you're watching. I haven't received that link. But
Oops.
yeah, look, I can certainly post that into the comments box once this is posted on Facebook for everybody to see. So if they want to, if people want to get in touch, there's more than one way to get in touch. Obviously, we do quite a bit of Facebook advertising as well. So if you see anything come up on your Facebook page from Real Property Advice, submit your details. We're more than happy to have a chat with you. I will say this, Cheryl, that what we do is not for everybody. It's also not risk-free. There's always a risk involved. I mean, it's property
Yep.
development at the end of the day. I don't want to sit here and say, look, come and, we're going to make you a millionaire overnight. That is definitely not the case. What we do is hard work. It takes a big team. I've got a huge team behind us. It's not just me and Scott and CEO. We've got an amazing team behind us of project managers, contractors, engineers, consultants that back up what we do and provide some great services to us. So, I mean, if anybody is
Fantastic.
interested, understand that there is risk, and it is not for someone that's just starting out in property development. It's
Yeah,
someone that
and just like with anything, like you said, if it's development, just educate yourself. Educate yourself so you know how to ask the questions.
that's right.
Watch videos like this so you know the questions to ask when what about the demand? What are we paying per square meter? So that you can do your own due diligence. At the end of the day, there is risk, and you talk about, when you speak to developers, it's about risk management. There are no guarantees. Is this how is this development managing its risk, and how are the people that are running it managing that risk and the transparency and the communication, like you
That's right.
mentioned.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's right.
Facebook user, which I'm thinking is CEO, is has popped in a Calendly there.
Oh, beautiful.
Wonderful. I love how it just like appears out of thin air, like magic. Like magic. What sort of cash return is expected in? Oh, Mox, it's industrial development, not commercial development. We talked
Yeah,
about this at the beginning, didn't we?
we did. Yeah, we did. However, I will answer that question though on a light industrial or industrial development. Um, I typically wouldn't touch a project where the clients aren't making 25% per annum as an absolute bare minimum. But on a good light industrial project, you could expect, if you're doing the project on your own, you could expect around 70, 80, 90% return on cash that you're putting into the project. If you're doing it with a developer such as ourselves, you would make 50% of the profits. You could expect anywhere from sort of 25 to about 65, 75% on average.
Hmm. Awesome, awesome. Thanks,
Yeah.
Remo. Fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I'm sure anyone that's watching this, you probably get targeted by Facebook ads now, just to give you a heads up.
Yeah, yeah, you will.
Exactly. It's all planned. They're all listening to you.
That's
So
it.
amazing, Remo. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and obviously going through some numbers, which was very, very interesting. More importantly, like I said, anyone that's listening, it's about education and it's about again doing your own due diligence and your research. Go into everything with your eyes wide open. So thank you for being our guest tonight. Happy
Thank you.
Happy
I'm honored to
Christmas,
be here.
Merry Christmas. You got your
Merry
Christmas tree all
Christmas.
up already. Is that too early to say? Is that like saying Happy Easter?
I've got two little
Kids,
girls. So on the
yes.
weekend, it was like, Dad, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, you know what? Let's
Let's
paint
put out
the Christmas tree
Christmas
white so it
tree.
looks like
Oh,
there's snow on it. So we
snow, of
did that.
course.
I loved it. And then we waited for it to dry. So it was like a full day of, running around, getting things
Activities.
organized,
How
getting it
cool.
all out, painting.
What are
And
you going to do this weekend, Dad?
Well, this weekend I'm out dirt bike riding all weekend, and apparently we're gonna have rain. So
It might be a bit
yeah,
of a muddy ride. Oh, good. Well, you
I'm
take care
looking
of
for.
yourself, ride safe. And if I don't see you before Christmas, have a wonderful Christmas. And thank you so much, everyone. If you want to get in touch with Remo, he is on Facebook. Reach out to him. And thanks for your patience at the start. We'll see you in the next episode of the Business of Property. Take care.